element for brands and for companies. And what we are now seeing in our data is the emergence of a more values-driven consumer, a marketplace that is prizing ethics, integrity, community, social responsibility, and the conduct of companies to respond to a consumer in crisis. Now, this becomes very important because as I begin to show you some of the companies that are connecting in this new mindset, you will see a pattern of being companies that are acting with integrity and with ethics. So a few other things to talk about how the consumer is changing. One of the things that we see in the United States is a shift back from spending to savings. So savings is starting to return as spending starts to slow. We are also seeing the shift from a credit to a debit society. And what this means is that we're now spending money that we have rather than what we have borrowed. This becomes very important because it starts to impact more carefully the brand decisions that we make every day. In fact, Visa reported for the first time in its history that more of its users are using the debit card versus the credit card. Now, many people have speculated that this is a new normal, that there's some sort of profound change. And at least in America, I would argue that it's an old normal, that we're not going to a new place, we're actually returning back to a place that guided society for many years. True, there is new technology that's allowing these values to come hold, but if you look at the data on savings, and you go back over nearly 100 years, you can see something that I call the 50-20 paradox. This means it took us 50 years to reach a savings rate of about 10% in America, and it took only 20 years to reach a negative savings rate. So the argument I'm making is that it's not a new normal, it's that the last 30 years were simply crazy behavior, at least in America. This correlated with the explosion of wealth, the rise in housing values that could not be sustained, as we learned, and the explosion of credit, the availability of credit, which now those things have been corrected and the consumer is in a new place. We also looked at BAV to understand how people's values and attitudes towards brands might be changing. And what we found is that there was a shift between looking for brands that created an outward appearance, or what's on the outside, so brands that make me look stylish or present myself in a more outward like. That's the green line. And the pink line is what's on the inside, which was a correlation of attributes that we created to understand authenticity, integrity, quality, craftsmanship, performance. Now, what I think is interesting is the blue line shows the marketplace, and it shows that these two crossed over in 2007, even while the market was still roaring ahead. So one hypothesis we have is that perhaps consumers were becoming aware of their excess and were searching for more meaning in the things that they buy. We also looked at, after the recession, what are the most important attributes that people now look for in a brand? Similarly, we found a decline in things like trendy and glamorous, and a rise in things like socially responsible, leadership, quality, friendly, and kindness and empathy. Kindness and empathy rose by 391% in 1 year. It's the single biggest rise we have ever seen in any movement of any attribute in the history of our data. And it means that people want a company that they can trust, a company that's going to have their back, that is going to understand them in order to sell to them. We also learned that there were some very interesting shifts in people's behaviors. an emphasis on greater simplicity, looking for a more simple, down-to-earth lifestyle. We had 66% of people believing that their friends, with the power of social media, that they can change corporate behavior through their actions. We also found nearly 78% of people disagreeing with the idea that money is the best measure of success, while nearly 2/3 of people wanted to take more control of themselves and their future rather than relying on others. Lastly, nearly 76% of people said that I realized that how many things I have, how much stuff, doesn't have that great of an impact on how happy I am. So some interesting lessons that started to emerge out of the recession that we now want to go deeper into and understand how companies, through their business models, through their products and services, can connect to these shifting values that we see happening. The first cultural value shift is an idea that we call liquid life. Whereas before, it was about having lots of stuff, the more things you had, that was a measure of your success. Today, your measure of success is how nimble and adaptable and flexible you can be. So in place of excess, there's this desire to connect on a more adaptable sort of way. The consumer strategy that comes out of that is the idea of déclassé consumption, which means that to consume money recklessly, to spend recklessly, makes you look a little out of fashion. So what managers need to do is connect on both a dollars and a cents level, connecting to the practicality and the thrift of this new consumer. So something is happening when P. Diddy vows to tone down his bling. P. Diddy, famous rapper, decided that he was looking too showy, too ostentatious. We also saw that high-end haggling became very important trend in America. This is interesting because haggling, which is to barter, is a very difficult thing culturally in my society. And yet for high-end goods, luxury goods, and real estate, this became a very big trend. Another thing we saw was the idea of dismantling your ego, leaving some of your pretension behind. This is the story of the success of a blue-collar yacht club in the Bronx in New York. Now you can join this yacht club on the condition that you work in the boatyard. So many people getting interested in things that aren't about riding around in fancy limousines, about actually connecting to something that's more real. We also note the success of this brand, which has started to mimic the actual human foot. The idea in this athletic performance shoe is that you should actually feel the road that you're running on. You should not be cushioned from it. It's actually better for you to feel the road, and perhaps a little bit of pain as well. Another trend we saw is a famous brand in the US now that's called Fresh Jive that decided to drop its brand name. They decided that their products and their quality of their shirts and their suits was so good that a brand label would actually distract from that quality. So they dropped the brand name, and now it's just a brand without a name. It's logoless. So if you look at the label, it's just a simple white label with no name on it. We also saw the rise of living more variably, not having as many fixed costs, and finding ways to dramatically reduce your everyday monthly budget. One way you can do that is with Hulu. Hulu is being favored by many millennials, 20-somethings, who are using Hulu in place of paying for cable. Another example is not rushing into a purchase by being able to carefully shop online. This is